laid the foundation for us. But not only am I going to lay the foundation, I'm really going to make sure that our department is really moving forward on making sure that this city is the best policed city in the country and also the safest city in the country, because that is our charter responsibility.
Well, interim no more. We're talking about confirmation hearings this week for Adrian Diaz, soon to be the permanent chief of the Seattle Police Department, the 65th chief in the history of the SPD. So what are his biggest challenges ahead? We have a chief staying on, but a few council members jumping ship. What is the future of the city council looking like with Lisa Herbold and Deborah Juarez deciding not to run again in 2023? And also, what happened with the project around the Canal Bridge that's now going to cost the city and county a lot more money? Well, fire up the calculator, adjust your earbuds. It is time for Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are mine, all mine. And joining me, my co-host, the ever intrepid, is a weekly column for the South Seattle Emerald. Kevin, thank you as always for being here. I just wanted to ask, with this time of year, tell me where you'd rather be, shopping for holiday gifts at the mall, or sawing off your own left arm. What do we got?
Ooh, tough question.
I know, right?
There's some folks that like going shopping for holiday gifts. I'm also one of those folks who starts early. Like I'm looking kind of year round. And like when I see stuff, it's like, yeah, I'll grab that now and I'll stick that in my closet for several months.
That's super smart, man. All right, Kevin.
Makes it a
little
easier. Yeah.
It does. I could definitely use some help there. Thank you, Kevin, as always, for joining the podcast here. Thanks also to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. They're rocking the suburbs on the first floor of Seattle City Hall. Thank you, John, as always. If you are listening, please become a patron. We actually need some more of you to help forward the cause here, folks. So please think about this. And for 2 more weeks only, if you pledge at the $10 level, this was the crazy idea that Kevin and I came up with, a special Seattle News, Views, and Brews coffee mug. We love featuring mug shots on the show. These are photos, people holding up their mugs. We're only offering these for a few more weeks. So this week's mug shot, Charlotte with a lovely looking cup of tea. Well, here's to you, tea drinkers. Have a sip, pinkies up. Thank you for your support of the show. Thanks to all of our patrons, coffee drinkers too, I should point out. And heads up, folks, a quick note from the Seattle Department of Transportation. As we get some temperatures near freezing over the next couple of weeks, more important than ever to help out your neighbors, keep your sidewalks clear, drive a little less if you can, maybe, stock up on groceries, and keep an eye on that forecast. Always a little bit unsettled this year. Learn more at seattle.gov/winter-weather. All right, party people, time for Right Here, Right Now. All right, here we go. This week, the Seattle City Council's Public Safety Committee will hold a confirmation hearing for Adrian Diaz, who's set to be the permanent chief of the Seattle Police Department, losing that interim title he's hung on to for a couple of years. Kevin, I don't think there's any question here that the council will approve this appointment of Chief Diaz by the mayor. Do you?
No, I don't. I think, Councilmember Swan is likely to vote no.
Always does, yeah.
She is looking for much more significant changes in the way the police are done. She wants to see an elected board, a civilian board overseeing the police department, which would require, changes to the city charter and lots of other things. But she's not going to be happy with anything short of that. So she's going to vote no. She'll, probably make a speech saying that this is, just more of the same. But other than that, especially going in election year for 7 of the 9 positions next year, right. I think there are some folks who are just going to want to not rock the boat, and there'll be some hand wringing about whether Chief Diaz has shown himself to be committed to the level of reform that the council progressive majority wants. But at the end, they really don't have solid evidence to justify voting no. Diaz has been walking a fine line here. He's trying to be supportive of police officers, so recruiting will get better, but he's also been supportive of tough disciplinary measures and of civilian alternatives to dispatching police to every 911 call that they get, right? So he's trying to find the middle ground there, do a little bit for everything and move things forward. And I think it's going to be tough for the city council to find reasons to say no.
Yeah, and I just wanted to flash back, if I could, to last November. We were talking about this actually on this podcast, Kevin, an inflammatory video released by then interim Chief Diaz, who was concerned about a consideration by the Seattle City Council to abrogate 101 ghost positions on the SPD. Sound familiar? Jobs the department couldn't fill the next year. Here we go again. We did not see any of that type of inflammatory rhetoric this year when the council did, in fact, abrogate positions, 80 of them. So I'm thinking about what has changed here, and I'm guessing this is the political side of it. Once again, I know Diaz doesn't want to lose those slots in terms of officers that he could hire, but I'm also guessing he doesn't want to lose his opportunity to become the permanent chief and rub the council the wrong way.
Yeah, that's definitely not something that you want to do right before your confirmation hearing, is to put out something inflammatory like that. Yeah. So he's playing nice.
Yeah, yeah. I did want to say, though, his position on 911 alternatives, it feels like this middle ground that maybe the council and the SPD have come to is this. Okay, we're going to dispatch people to these scenes, these different low acuity potentially scenes, who will send some officers, and we will send some social workers, things of that nature, but they'll go in different vehicles is kind of the detente I've seen here, such that these teams aren't necessarily going in the same van as it is in other cities out there.
Well,
Do you feel like that's what's going to come forward? I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I think at a 30,000 foot level, I think where it's going to go is pretty clear. There are 4 classifications, right?
Right.
Of all the 911 calls and the things, there's things you just send a civilian response to. There's things you send just police to, and there's things you send both to. And then there's a question of who's the lead. Is the civilian the lead or is the police the lead? So we got these 4 categories. Now, the hard question is, which 911 calls go into which boxes? We had this so-called Nick Jr. report, which was kind of an after-the-fact look at it and said that there's a large number of these calls that could have just been handled by civilians. But it doesn't answer the key question, which is at the time the 911 call comes in, with the information the 911 dispatcher has, do they have enough information to make the right decision there? And that's where this is all bound up. And they've been spending the last year and a half trying to build basically an AI model to be able to say, okay, can a 911 dispatcher triage these calls based upon what they hear? Can they make decisions? And what happens if they're wrong? Right. About that. That's where the whole thing is tied up. So I think what they're going to probably almost certainly start with is a very conservative approach, saying there's this set of calls that we know we can just have as a civilian go to. It's very clear, what happens when they're wrong. The probability of something going very, very wrong is really low. Let's start with that. Let's learn. Let's keep iterating from there. So I'm pretty sure that that's where this is going to start with.
Yeah, and I think Chief Diaz has been supportive of that idea in general. I mean, that's the part that I'm trying to get to. How much of a partner he's going to be in that process.
Yeah, he will. And the city council members submitted a bunch of questions to him as part of this confirmation process. That was one of them, and he said very clearly there, I am supportive of this process. Right, we have to go through this process of figuring out, how we triage these calls correctly and what the correct response is to each of them based upon what we know at the time of the 911 call. But yeah, I'm supportive of doing this. Yeah.
Well, definitely some issues that we'll see play out there at the start of the year, as the city council and the city overall rolls out this plan to have this alternative 911 pilot program rolling out. So we'll definitely keep an eye on what's going on there. But I wanted to talk about another public issue that might not always come to the top of the radar for folks, but definitely part of what the Public Safety Committee is looking at this week. Bit of a crisis for our city, really. You don't hear a lot about it, but here's what's up. We have more than 1,000 of these unreinforced masonry buildings in Seattle. They need some massive retrofitting work. Not safe in the case of an earthquake. You can find a lot of these in the Chinatown ID neighborhood, Pioneer Square as well. And Kevin, the city has been working on this issue for years. I did a piece on it on City Inside Out actually a couple years ago. There's actually a resolution on the books right now to make this retrofitting mandatory. But I'm thinking about this. 2 big issues come to mind. That costs a lot of money, first off, and I don't even think Seattle has a good handle on just how much of this work is needed citywide.
Yeah, as you said, it's been going on for years and years and years. Former council members, who've long, left the council, have been working on this. And I wrote an article about this for SEC Insight back in 2019. So they think about 1,150 unreinforced masonry buildings in Seattle. About 950 of them are private hands. Altogether, that's about 20 million square feet. And there's more than public hands, which means that, the responsibility for retrofitting them is going to be in, city, county, and state governments. But they don't know for sure because the record keeping about which ones have been reinforced over the years is really bad. So, they're not condemned buildings now, even though they're unsafe. Right. And for those who don't understand sort of what this unreinforced masonry is about, it's basically about brick walls that are being treated as structural walls in a building, even though in an earthquake they're going to fall apart. And in places where there's structural walls holding up like the second or third floor of the building, those entire floors could collapse. They could just pancake down if the brick walls basically collapse out, and they very well could, right? So you have to go in and either put in some new posts and physically attach the brick walls to them, or you have to basically build new walls around that. So there's a couple of choices that are either expensive or extremely expensive to do.
Yeah, you can see them sometimes like those little circles on the outside of these brick walls. That's an indication that some of this work has been done. But
and the city has a whole map. You can go up and look at a GIS map that pinpoints all the ones that they think are unreinforced masonry buildings, including some, school buildings are in this category, right?
That's right.
So there have been efforts for years to try to address this, but it's going to require updating the code, and that's one of the things that the city is sort of looking at now. But nothing has happened because there's no money to do this, and many private building owners would not be able to afford it. So, estimates depending on how intensive the work would be to retrofit these buildings are anywhere from $5 per square foot to $45 per square foot, which just for the privately owned buildings alone is anywhere from $100 to $900 million to do this.
And it's a big cost. And I know also this is something that exists as affordable housing. Granted, these are older buildings, but this exists as affordable housing. So you have to take those off the market, as it were. That's a cost to consider here too.
Yeah, and it will temporarily displace the people who are living in those buildings to do that. And in fact, after they're retrofitted, they might not be affordable housing anymore because of the extra costs that the owners of the buildings would have to take on to do this. So there's but the bigger thing is really the money at this point. There is not money to do this. There aren't state or federal funds, grants and loans, really, in a lot of ways, to be able to cover all the expenses of doing this. So if the city mandates this, then what happens, right? Do a lot of these buildings get torn down? Do they? Do we send a bunch of building owners into debt in order to do this work? Do they end up selling them to somebody else who's going to tear them down and build, luxury condos?
Build something more expensive.
What happens from there? So that's a real tenuous part of this is that if they go ahead and do this, and really make this a mandatory retrofit that has to happen over the next 3-4 years, something like that.
Yeah.
How is that going to play out? So the city has just hired a new program manager.
To manage
this program. Somebody who at the federal level has some experience with helping cities figure out an unreinforced masonry retrofit plan. So we'll see what happens here. They still don't have any big ideas about where the money is going to come from to do all this, but they seem ready to move forward. And it is a real problem, right? These are buildings that are occupied, and the people in these buildings, whether they're going to school, whether they're living, whether they're working there, are at risk. If a major earthquake hits, their lives are going to be in danger, right? So it is a real problem that needs to be addressed, but there's no easy way to address it.
No, and I think about the race and social justice overlay to this too. A lot of these buildings are in the Chinatown ID. That's something to consider as well. But this is something, folks, that the council says it's going to have some sort of report on, a more generalized report that shows what's happening citywide by the middle of next year. And that's about the time when they're talking about drafting this ordinance. This is definitely one of those issues that I know is going to get pushed on the back burner, but it's something that I really do want to keep tracking here. So, Kevin, thank you for breaking that down with me. Very, very much appreciated. Okay, up next year, will the last Seattle City Council member leaving the council please turn out the lights? What's going on here? Two big announcements about council members deciding not to run again in 2023. We're going to break it down on Now Hear This. So some big news within the past week here. We have heard from two sitting Seattle City Council members that they are not running again for a new term in 2023. Lisa Herbold from District 1 in West Seattle and Deborah Juarez from North Seattle D5. Now, Juarez has said before she would only serve for 2 terms, but the Herbold decision, an interesting one to pull apart here. She says she wants another progressive voice to take her place on the council. And I'm going to reach back right now to 2019 when she ran for her second term on City Council, defeating Phil Tavel in that race. Here's a soundbite you can almost go with 4 years later.
So we're going to have a lot of turnover on the city council, no matter what happens. We have at least 4 new council members coming in January, and I think it's really important for West Seattle to be represented by somebody who has the experience and has the reputation, is working really hard on behalf of her constituents.
Kevin, let's talk about this. Were you surprised that Lisa Herbold said she wasn't going to run again?
No, I could have seen it going either way on this.
Yeah.
And, what I'm hearing in the back channel is that her polling numbers in District 1 are terrible. And so, and sort of without explicitly saying, I know I can't win, what I hear her saying, public is she really wants to make sure another progressive wins in District 1. She doesn't want to risk someone further to the right winning against a damaged candidate. So she's announcing her intent now so that other progressive candidates without her baggage can step up now and consolidate the progressive wing support. That's right. So I mean, we haven't heard any of the candidates announce yet as of, an hour last time I checked the news, an hour before we started recording this.
Yeah.
But, I would be shocked if we didn't get at least one announcement this week. Somebody's going to jump in. Right.
Oh, I think so too. And I thought it was interesting in the announcement that she put out in her newsletter to her constituents. She mentioned a few different things here. She mentioned, hey, on the Seattle left, there's some people out there that say we're going to get rid of all the council members who are not proposing a 50% cut to SPD's budget. But then she says also, Herbold says, in connection with that, the 2021 race for the city attorney, there was a strong, proven progressive, she says, didn't advance. We're talking about Pete Holmes there. And then we got to this general election where there was this choice between someone who was an abolitionist and then a Republican who we have serving right now with Ann Davison. She doesn't want that to repeat in 2023. I think she's really reading a lot of different political tea leaves here. I thought it was interesting that she brought up the city attorney's race.
Yeah, although, I mean, let's be clear. That was a citywide race. A District 1 race is very, very different from a citywide race. We've seen that over and over again. We get, it's a smaller number of people voting for a position, which really kind of tends to swing it more towards the extremes, right? So it's definitely a case. It's certainly easier for a progressive to get elected in a district than in a citywide position, like a far left progressive. Okay. Councilmember Sawant would never get elected citywide. Right, but she can get elected in District 3. Right. So, at the same time, we'll have to see over the last 4 years how the demographics and the attitudes in District 1 have changed. Right, and it's been a tough 4 years,
and it's a changing District 1 too. Where I was going to say that there are some new constituents that are added to District 1 because of redistricting, including Pioneer Square. That's a little bit of a grab here that is different in terms of how the district looks from then to now. Do you think that might have an impact on things?
And Georgetown and Soto, and then again, it's been a really tough a couple of years, right? Since the last election, they've gone through the whole West Seattle Bridge being closed down, right?
Through COVID,
so they're undoubtedly going to be thinking about all that as they think about who they want to represent them in City Hall.
Yeah. I guess I wanted to broaden this a little bit, Kevin, and think about Councilmember Herbold leaving, also Councilmember Juarez leaving, the council president, of course, Councilmember Juarez. And then looking at that, 2 positions here, we're hearing about it in December, even before campaigning, I guess, starts up in January, which is a little crazy, but here we go. In thinking about this, 2 positions there for people who have served there for a couple of terms, and Herbold even longer than that as a legislative aide. But talk to me about maybe what you could see as the future of the council with those 2 voices, at least saying we're not in the mix. What's that going to do to the political calculus here?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and Juarez has certainly been a much more moderate candidate, moderate council member than Herbold has, and a very popular one in District 5. She has definitely been out there campaigning very hard and to get resources and get services for District 5. She's been all about D5, waving that flag as often and as fast as she can. And, and she's done some amazing stuff for that district, right? And if anything, she's been the model for how to be a district-based council member and really deliver for your district. You think about what's happened around the Northgate area, getting new services up in the North End, getting a light rail station. She's been, working super
Pedestrian
hard
bridge,
getting
yeah, you name it.
the pedestrian bridge, the 130th Street light rail station, getting the Kraken practice center there in Northgate. I mean, she's really done a lot, and so she set a very high bar for whatever comes next, right? I think that's and that may become more important to the voters of District 5 than exactly where they are on the partisan spectrum. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, we've had a council member who's delivered over and over and over again. Right. Are you going to deliver for us? Right. Are you going to be in there, fighting to get more stuff in District 5? We'll see.
Yeah. We'll see. Yeah, and I'm also talking to Councilmember Herbold on Council Edition this week on Seattle Channel. Make sure you tune in to see what she is saying about the future of the council. Fascinating future ahead that it will be in 2024 and very busy. Let's switch to some other news here, Kevin. The Public Utilities Committee this week has a very interesting and slightly alarming topic to consider here. It's a project at the Ship Canal and that Ship Canal Bridge area to improve water quality. This is about reducing sewer overflows. And there's just a ton of things that have gone wrong here. Kevin, break it down here. This is a years-long project yet again. And as with many other city initiatives, COVID has certainly not helped here. But what's been going on with this?
Yeah, so just a quick background on this project. So many parts of Seattle, including, right around the Ship Canal, have what's called a combined sewer outflow system, right?
That's right.
Where the same set of underground pipes collect up stormwater and sewage, and they pipe them all down to the sewage processing center out near Discovery Park for processing. But because it's a combined system,
get a big storm.
When we get a big rainstorm, there are these overflow basically pipes that send the overflow into the Ship Canal, right? And several years back, the federal government said, no, you're dumping raw sewage into the Ship Canal. We're not going to have any of that. You need to fix this. So they set a deadline. They forced the city and the county, who jointly own this system, to sign a consent decree saying you'll have this fixed by December 31st, 2025.
Right.
And so they've raised a ton of money. They've raised utility rates to pay for this whole system. It's been looking like it's the most recent estimate was it was going to cost about $560 million to do this. And they've been slowly working through the whole plans. They've got a whole plan where they're going to dig a new tunnel basically just on the north end of the Ship Canal to get out towards Discovery Park and the system there that will just give them more capacity so they don't have to do the overflow, right? And store water literally in the pipes as they're shipping it down there. So what they've been doing now, well, two things have happened. One, we've had COVID delays. I guess three things. We've had COVID delays. Construction costs have gone way up along with inflation and everything else. So the simple cost of doing this project has ballooned because of that. And then on top of that, they've been going through and doing borings along the places where they're going to build this tunnel. And they've discovered a bunch of places where what's supposed to be underground in those places is not where it's supposed to be. The as quote unquote as built documentation for what's underground is wrong. And then they found in one place, they made provision. They said, well, we expect to find like up to 80 or so boulders underground that are maybe 3 feet in diameter, and they found one what they call a mega boulder that's 12 feet in diameter. That's going to cost millions of dollars more for them to basically deal with if they have to bore through it or try to remove it or something like that. So altogether, they're figuring now somewhere between $45 and $80 million more cost to do this project, and with the COVID delays and the other delays for dealing with these other issues, they expect that they're not going to get it done by the 2025 deadline. So now they have to go back and negotiate with the federal government to say we're going to need an extension, and they'll almost certainly get it, right? Yeah, but nobody's going to be happy about this.
And I just wanted to make sure they're saying, at least in this report they're making to the council, the Seattle Department of Constructions and Inspection, they are saying that it's going to be possible to do this with this overrun that you're talking about, $45 to $80 million, without raising rates. I know that's a big thing that's a bottom line for a lot of people here. That's we'll see how that goes. That's a bit of a curveball, if you ask me.
they'll probably have to push out some other costs. They've got,
Yeah.
it's a capital project. So, they've got
Yeah.
capital funding every year, and
Right.
they will have to push out some other capital costs in order to be able to
I
do that.
see.
And we'll see if they're
Yeah.
successful in doing that.
Yeah.
There may be parts of that that are out of control, right?
Yeah.
Doing, capital expenditures and major maintenance and things like that every year. You've got a plan going on for many years about how long you think every piece of equipment and facility you
Yeah.
have is going to last, and when you're going to need to do major maintenance or replace it. And then as you get closer, you find some of them are going to need to be done earlier, and some are going to be, we can push out a little further. We will see what happens. Hopefully they're right.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Some of it's going to be out of their control.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Kevin, for breaking that down. All right, well, coming up, a new study about public health concerns as related to firearm deaths. Deep dive topic here. Kevin's written about it in the South Seattle Emerald. It's our podcast gem of the week. Kevin, I wanted to say thank you for writing this story. It's a different sort of gem, I guess, when you think about it here, because it's dealing with some very difficult topics, homicide and suicide. So fair warning here, folks. Just wanted to make sure I put that out there. But could you break down what you're seeing here with some of these numbers? I thought this was fascinating.
Yeah, so there's a new report out looking back all the way to 1990, over the last 31 years, at firearm deaths. And they took a different approach to kind of visualizing and exploring the data set around this to understand, what are the concentrations, what are the demographics, where are the things going on that we haven't really noticed before. And, at a high level, between 1990 and 2021, there were about 1.1 million firearm deaths, right? And a lot of the media attention goes around the homicides, and
Sure.
understandably, right? There were about 400,000 homicides. There were about 600,000 suicides by firearm over those 31 years. So this is something we tend not to focus on or remember, is that firearm deaths are more suicides than homicides. Both are super serious. They are critical, incredibly important, and tragic issues for our country to address. But there are two very different things going on with this. And the demographics of the homicide and suicide victims are very different. So homicide victims are primarily young Black and Hispanic men. Women, very low rates. I won't say there are none, because there are some, but it's primarily Black and Hispanic young men, right? Suicides, of the 600,000 some odd suicides, 85% of the victims were white. 85% of them were men. So actually almost 3/4 of them, 73%, were white men. A substantial number of them were age 65 and older. The age range for suicides skews, where homicides skews very low, for suicides it skews very high. It tends to be older. Above age 65, it's really kind of scary how large the numbers are.
And it jumped out at me, Kevin, just that basic stat of there are more suicides of white men alone than total homicides we're talking about. I mean, let that sink in. This is such a difficult story to unravel here. And I say this because, unfortunately, I have a friend, happened to be a white male who took his own life with a firearm. It was a couple years ago. Traumatic for everybody involved, and his family has been through it before, unfortunately. So it's such a difficult story to tell, but I think it's an important one, I guess, is my bottom line on it.
It is, and the geography of these two public health crises, and that's what they are. These are public health crises, are very different. So for the homicides, they're substantially in metropolitan areas and in the Deep South.
Okay.
For suicides, it's very much concentrated in the western part of the country and in rural and mountainous areas. So really not so much in the cities. And again, that's not to say there aren't any that happen in metropolitan areas. But so these two public health crises look very, very different. And yet we tend to talk about them as like, we have firearm issues.
Right.
Rather than talking about like, we have a firearm homicide public health crisis, and we have a firearm suicide public health crisis that are affecting largely two completely different sets of people, right? And the root causes are very different, though, of course, the widespread, easy availability of guns is a major factor in both that cannot be discounted.
Yeah. Yeah, a huge study. And Kevin, thank you for that breakdown. I really appreciate it. And I'm wondering if we can lighten things up just a little bit here as we end up the show. And can I ask you, what is your favorite holiday tradition in Seattle? I'm asking mainly because I've got some folks coming in from out of town. I'm trying to figure out that great thing we can do together all as a family. What do you got, man?
My favorite is wild lanterns at the zoo, and
Yeah, yeah.
full disclosure, I volunteer at the zoo.
Yes, he
So
does.
I certainly have a bias in the direction anyway, but
Yes.
it's just great. It's great, and if you and your family go to the zoo, here's the pro tip not to miss.
Okay.
Coming through the West Gate, and right there by the guest services, there's a little concession stand called Penguin Provisions, serving up hot chocolate, hot apple cider, and most importantly, fresh warm donuts. Do not miss the donuts.
Don't sleep on the donuts.
Go on the West Gate, pick up a set of warm donuts, and they'll give you a bunch in a bag, and you just walk around eating the warm donuts and drinking your hot chocolate or apple cider. That is the place to be.
Wow. That's this, Kevin. Now I know. I appreciate it, man. Thank you, as always, for helping me break this down. And thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. This podcast is on Apple, Spotify, wherever you like to listen. Please also find Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Really need your help here. Please show your support. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media, too. See you next time.
Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2022.